Welcome everybody to today's faculty forum. And thank you for being here on this great day. It's going to be like this all weekend. I don't care what the weatherman says. It's homecoming at Central. It's going to be a great day. Today we're fortunate to have our speaker. He's going to talk about CMU Homecoming, memories of transformational moments. If you think about it, homecoming is about coming back and remembering those moments. So those students who are with us today, thank you for being here. You've had some moments. You're going to see some old people hugging folks that they haven't seen in years, talking about how great they were. I used to be 6'5". That's what Gordon's sticking with. My name is Bill Sheehan, and I get the pleasure of serving as the Executive Vice President here at Central Methodist, and I'm a member of the Class of '84. Again, it's homecoming, and we're excited to have you guys. Before I get started, I want to thank all the members of the Perry family who showed up today to surprise Tad, and we'll talk about that in a second. But we have members of the Perry family from at least South Dakota, Texas, Cape, Farmington, Fayette. So if the members of the Perry family, if you're related to the Perry family, please stand up so we can say thank you. Dr. Robert Tad Perry spent 40 years in higher education. Thus, the reason we asked him to speak on today's topic. Dr. Perry is a member of the class of '65. If you do the math, they're celebrating their 60th class reunion. 60. Dr. Perry is the retired executive director of the South Dakota Higher Education Board of Regents, having retired in 2009. During his 15 years in that role, he was the longest serving state higher education executive officer in the country. Prior to that, Dr. Perry was an assistant provost at Ball State University and a longtime political science faculty member. A couple of quick notes about Dr. Perry for this group in general. He is a proud graduate of the Fayette High School in 1961. Tad was inducted into the South Dakota Hall of Fame in 2022. I'm sure if you'll ask him, he'll have all kinds of comments that are probably not appropriate for print, so we'll do that when we video. If we have any Mokers in the room, Tad is a member of Alpha Phi Gamma, the Mokers. Oh, yeah. We got one.
Yeah.
The Mokers, I was going to have applause, so okay. He even wrote in there, applause. I was waiting for it. Tad has been a member of our Board of Trustees for 25 plus years, including having recently served as the chair of the board and did an incredible job as the chair and as a trustee. About an hour ago, Dr. Roger Drake, our president, presented Tad with the President's Medal, and I want to read this because I want to make sure I get it right, which is given at the discretion of the President of the University to individuals who have contributed significantly of their time, talent, treasure to enhance the university and whose contributions made an impact on campus, students, faculty, and staff. Tad and his wife Carolyn, a member of the class of '66, have been tremendously generous in the communities they've lived, including in Fayette with Fayette Together and the Boys and Girls Club of Fort Pierre, South Dakota. The Perrys also did a really incredible thing. They established the Perry Fellow program at Central, which recognizes and honors CMU faculty who get it. It's actually written in the document. They get it. That they get that personal relationship that we all have the opportunity to experience, and that they want to pass that that belief, that practice down to our students. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Robert Tad Perry.
Thank you.
Congrats.
You're
Congrats.
awful nice to me. Thank you so much, Bill. You're very generous. My mother would have appreciated it. For the alumni, homecoming is a special moment to come back and reflect on those transformational moments that you had while you were here. For those of you who are faculty and staff, it's an opportunity for you to think about those transformational moments that you shared with those students if you had throughout the years. For you students, you're just creating them. And you'll, 60 years from now, can be in this space and think about all the wonderful things that happened to you as a result of your CMU experience. Anybody in this room who's a graduate could be up here and talk about transformational memories that they've had. I had a great journey, but it's no more special than the great journeys that all of you have had as well. So my wish is that your takeaway from these few moments is an opportunity to not reflect on my story, but to reflect upon how these stimulate your own memories of those great moments that you've had. I came to Central not knowing what I wanted to do. I knew one thing. I wanted to play basketball. So, as a freshman, I spent the first couple of months of the fall semester going to practice every day, doing everything I could to impress the then coach that I might be worthy. Well, as we got down to the first game of the season, there were 13 of us still practicing with the squad. There were 2 freshmen, myself, and a guy who is 6'8". And for some reason, the coach could only take 12 players on the first road trip. And he informed me that he saw more value in 12 inches. Left me at home. That was a transformational moment for me because that went away. I had to trade Puckett Fieldhouse for the library. And it was a change that really made a big difference in what happened to me since. You know, life is nothing but a bunch of changes that we go through. They're mostly incremental, marginal, and little things that just reflect adjustments. And then there are those transformational moments that hit you. These are profound. They alter who you are as an organization or a community or an individual. They change how you operate, think, or behave. It makes a difference in who you are or what you are. Transformational change happens to institutions as well as individuals. And it's happened at Central. And those of us who are sharing this 60-year experience, I want to share with you some of the transformational change that you've seen this university go through since we were here. And some of you will recall this. Those of you who are here now will have no clue about some of this, but we'll catch that to you. And certainly know that I have a granddaughter here and a great nephew. They have no clue as to how transformational this institution has been over the last 60 years. The population of the institution has gone from being an affluent, white-based institution to one very diverse with a significant international component. The curriculum of a classical liberal arts program is now one that integrates liberal arts with those career-oriented curriculum. We used chalkboards, manual typewriters when we were here, even went to the library. Today you have Digital U, you do hybrid classes, and the board just spent 2 days talking about AI, which is the new way that you do your business. Student life, we had dorm hours for the women. Imagine that. We had dress codes. Today, you have a holistic view of the wellness of students, including mental health. We communicated by those, there were devices that hung in the hallway of the dorms. And they had a big cord on them, and you could talk to them. That's how you communicated. If you wanted to date, you had to see if you could get somebody on that line, and you probably had to make 7 or 8 calls to make the right connection. Today, you have that instant communication in your pocket. and can handle whatever you need to do. The mission of this university has gone from being a campus base to being, we'll teach students wherever they are. There were no women intercollegiate athletics in the 1960s. Today, you have very dominant women athletic teams. For the most part, the women students who were here 60 years ago ended up in the education field or something related to it. Today, women have access to virtually every profession available. And I'm going off script a bit. When I was here, if you got caught with some alcohol beverage on campus, you were either placed on social probation or even, to the extreme, given a vacation from the school for a while. Later today, there will be adult beverages served in the Student Center, and they'll be at the tailgate tomorrow. Just as Central has been an institution that has gone through a series of transformational change, it's the place where students experience transformational change. Students leave this institution fundamentally different from when they arrived. They're prepared for life. This is what I experienced. I was well prepared because I had a liberal arts background to take me into my journey. What does liberal arts have to do with transformational change? That's a really good question, and so I did what was contemporary. I went to AI and asked it so I could be correct. That's another story. Liberal arts education trains people to question assumptions, analyze systems, and think holistically. Courses in philosophy, literature, history cultivate moral reasoning and emotional intelligence, which are vital for human-centered relationships. Whether it's rallying stakeholders or crafting compelling narratives, liberal arts graduates excel at translating complex ideas into accessible language. Liberal arts encourage synthesis across fields, connecting economics to sociology, science to politics, which is key for solving multifaceted problems. And last, liberal arts programs emphasize public service, democratic values, and leadership. Keep going. There we go. The bottom line is, liberal arts provides you with the tools that you need to engage others as you go through your career and life, as you try to find solutions to those real-world challenges that you face. My experience at Central was centered on two faculty members, Dr. Bob Jacobs and Dr. Harold Sanu. They were the political science department in my era. They prepared me for my journey, and they framed the approach that I would take as a higher education professional throughout my career. My journey went from, as Bill indicated, I was a professor of political science in the classroom for about a decade before I took a wrong turn and ended up in the administration building at Ball State University for 13 years, doing what could be characterized as the state government relations work, which meant I did the budget work to get money from the state. In a public institution, you get money easily. You just go to the state and ask for it, and that was my job. And so I had to create the programs that would be fundable and take that and work with it. And that propelled me then into my last stop on the journey as the executive officer for a system of 8 institutions in South Dakota. As I look back on that, there are 4 themes that tie me back to Central in that career. Opportunities, expectations, about performance, relationships, and problem solving. And let me go through each of these with you the next several minutes. Opportunities. There was a summer session after my sophomore year, and Dr. Jacobs was going to teach a course in comparative foreign government that I thought I really wanted to take. So as I started the classes, I went to see him and he said, "Can't do it. There's not enough students to teach the course, so we're not going to teach the course this summer." And so I carried on the conversation and informed him that I really wanted the content of that course, and this was the only time I was going to have availability in my schedule. He said, "Okay, here." He hands me 8 books, and he says, "Go read them and come back at the end of the summer." Bob Jacobs gave me a special opportunity to learn how to teach myself. I had not had that. As I look back on it, that was probably one of the most important professorial opportunities that I was given. He did not have to do that. It was only extra work for him. But he cared enough about his students that he saw to it to give them the opportunity that they needed me. I am a last semester senior. And in my schedule, I have a hole for an elective course, and I see in the catalog there's this course called research. I said, you know, that might be something that would be worth learning how to do before I leave this place. And so back in those days, Puckett Fieldhouse they lined up with tables and the professors were there, and you had to go and get to the right table, get your slip, and then take it and build your class schedule. So I go to Puckett Fieldhouse, I find the table that would be the research table, and I explained to the faculty members what I wanted to do. I wanted to do a significant research project. And they said, "No, you're not eligible. You have to be an honors student to be able to do the research project." And so I'm a little headstrong and sometimes aggressive. And so I was having a prolonged, animated conversation with those faculty members. Dr. Sanu is at our table on the side, and I could see him out of the corner of my eye going. So I disengaged the conversation I was having. I wasn't getting anywhere anyway. I go over to Dr. Sanu's table and he says, "Sign here. Course, Far Asian History and Politics. Do research. No class." Oh, what a great idea. So I signed up for Far Asian History and Politics. And Dr. Sanu said, "Go do your research project." I went to class anyway because Dr. Sanu was so darn good and smart that not going to class was missing a great opportunity to learn something. But I did the research project. I spent a good part of that fall semester over at the University of Missouri Library. And I wrote a paper that my recall was in 80+ pages neighborhood. To me, that was pretty extensive, and you had to type it on a manual typewriter to boot. And I noted that Dr. Sanu did not have to do that. He gave me an opportunity to do something because he cared about his students and he wanted me to have the kind of experience that I thought I needed. That was the framework for what I thought professors did. So at Ball State, I had a student come to me once. He said, "I got to do an honors thesis. I need somebody to be my advisor. And I'd like to do something on political campaigns. I don't want to do a library project. I want to do something that's active." And so we sat down and we talked about it and we came up with a research plan. Jim lived in a section of Muncie where Ball State is that was not close to the university. And we were in the middle of a city council election. So Jim files as a candidate for the city council. And our research project was that he was going to use different campaign tactics in different precincts of the ward. So he did door-to-door in one, he made calls in one, he sent direct mail in one, he put up yard signs in one. So he could, since nobody knew who he was, we could test whether or not his communication strategies of campaign tactics made a difference. The votes came in, and the good news is he was not elected. But he had a great research project, and when we turned it in to the honors people, they informed us that it's the most unusual honors thesis they had seen. While a faculty member at Ball State, one of my assignments that I was given in the first year I got there was to create an intern program with the state legislature. And it's something that I did for about 10 years when I was a faculty member. And I would have 20 to 25 students a year go through this. My job was to find students who wanted to do that, help them manage their curriculum so that they have space that they could take a semester off and go do the internship and do all the mechanics with them. I got to know these students very, very well. I got to know those students just like Sanu and Jacobs got to know their students at Central. Those students continue to be part of my life. I have contact with many of them on an annual basis, and it is part of how I was taught by Sanu and Jacobs to work with students. Let's go to expectations. When I did that paper for Dr. Sanu, he had me come to his Far Asian class at the end of the semester and present it. I also had to present it to the Pi Gamma Mu organization about that same time. So I make my presentation, and I thought I was pretty good. I mean, this is a really extensive piece of work, and I've worked all semester on it. Those of you who remember Dr. Sanu, he had a quiet voice. He was very dignified, soft-spoken. So he let me do my presentation, and then at the end of the presentation, he starts asking questions. He says, the topic was the occupation of Japan in post-World War II. And so it was a fairly descriptive representation of what happened. But Dr. Sanu says, why didn't you approach this as an economic reconstruction framework? Why didn't you do this as a cultural transformation piece of work? Why didn't you do it as a comparison to how Germany was treated at that same point in time? His message was pretty clear. You have to think a whole lot harder and broader than what you had thought. His expectations, his message was, you've got to do more. You've got to think harder. You know, I remember those very uncomfortable moments in that exchange with him. So when I was a faculty member, I had expectations of students. One of my interns named Christy did the annual piece of paper research paper that I required of interns, which was to take, since they were working in the Indiana legislature, you take a legislative issue of the legislature in that session and tell me what they did, but more importantly, I wanted it to be a comparative analysis. I want to know how that same topic was dealt with in other state environments and whether or not that would be helpful to Indiana. Well, Christy turns in this paper, and she's like 99% of the students in the world. She had postponed the effort until the last possible moment. And so the work that she turned in was fairly descriptive, 99% descriptive and 1% analytical. And so when I put the grades together, I gave a grade that reflected that. She got a B. Christy came to see me. Christy was not happy that I gave her a B, and she wanted to know why. And so I gave her a lesson in what was the difference between passable work and exceptional work. And she leaves my office, not very happy, but she leaves my office. I don't see her again for several months. I'm teaching a course in political campaigns the next spring, and I look in the classroom and here's Christy. And she takes this political campaign course, and this is a campaign course where I made my students take a live congressional candidate and write a campaign plan for them. So every week we did candidate research, we did opposition research, we did how are you going to communicate, what's your message, how are you going to communicate your message, da da da. So at the end of the semester, they had a fairly extensive piece of work. Christy turns in her work. And it is maybe, if not the best, but among the very best pieces of work I had students do at Ball State. Christy shows up in my office a week later, after the semester's over. She says to me, I want you to know that I took your course for only one reason. I wanted to prove to you that I could do exceptional work. Having expectations. I had a student come into my office when I was doing the lobbying work for the university. I always took a couple of interns with me because I didn't want to do all the work myself. I had to have somebody do some of the work, so I had students do it. So I had a couple of students who I'd always take with me as interns. And I had this young man come in and he said, I'd heard about your internship program and I'm kind of interested in it. Well, the young man had hair down past his collar. He had some really nice earrings. And he was dressed in very casual campus attire. And so we go through a conversation about what the internship is, and I explained to him that when we go down to the legislature, the only people that are going to know of Ball State in some cases is going to be me and you. So how we present ourselves is critical because this is who they are going to think Ball State is. I didn't have to explain in detail to him what I meant. He leaves my office, he takes an application. John shows up the next day, coat and tie. He's been to the barber and he has hair in appropriate places and he has no earrings. And he hands me a nicely typed application. I hired him as an intern. Today, he's one of the most successful lobbyists in Indiana and the Midwestern states. He met the expectations that we set out for him. My last example of expectations is a student named Bill who was an intern with the legislature, and I had this thing about my students needed to go back to the university and complete their education after their internships. But you know, you show them the bright lights, you show them great opportunities to go be somebody and make money, and there were always people willing to hire these exceptional students. And Bill bit. He was 9 hours short of graduating. He takes a job with the Indiana legislature. Then he becomes a government relations guy for a corporation and gets married, has family. Life takes over. Doesn't finish those 9 hours. I take a lot of pride in my students graduating. It's what professors are supposed to do. So I get this call a couple years ago from Bill. He says, Doc, what are you doing next week? Because I want to take you to dinner and buy you a steak. Because you have been harassing me for 45 years to finish my degree, and I'm going through a commencement next Saturday. 45 years from the time he was an intern till the time he graduated. But he made it, and I now have 100% graduation rate of my intern students. Relationships. At Central, you learn how to work with people, not in the classroom particularly, but that's what fraternities and sororities are for. That's what student government is for. I did work in student publications, the Collegian and the Ragoo. I had those opportunities at Central to develop how we relate. And I have to, a little side note, back when they had those dorm hours for women, they locked them up at 10 o'clock. And that meant guys like Jack Ruby and Larry Yoakum, who are here, and I could go out in the evening and have relationships and have arguments and talk about current events or whatever we want to do. But we learned how to relate to each other and have significant relationships with people who are very different from us. That was a great skill to embed in that Central experience. So here I am. I have just taken this job in South Dakota as the executive for the higher education system. And part of the job of the executive is to tell the story of higher education to policymakers, legislators, governors, those guys. And my board told me that they had a view of what higher education ought to be like in South Dakota, and I was supposed to go convince those legislators of all that. Well, when I started talking to legislators in the governor's office, I find out they have a view about what higher education ought to be. And these are two very different views. And I have this image of myself being caught in between two concrete walls, moving in and smashing the hell out of me. Because they weren't on the same page. So my task was, what do I do about it? Well, there was a thing going around the country called roundtables. Institutions were using these, and I'd seen it at Ball State, where you brought in an outside facilitator. Couldn't be anybody who was part of the environment. You had to bring in somebody from the outside to manage the conversation. And I happened to have an opportunity to visit with the people who were doing this out of the University of Pennsylvania and ask them if they'd ever done this for a state. And they said, no, but we'll try. So I convinced them to come to South Dakota and conduct these roundtables. Now, roundtables are staffed by Board of Regents members, institutional presidents, institutional staff, some faculty, and then legislators, governor's office, business people. So there's a variety of viewpoints at the table. And the key was to have a discussion and see if you could find anything to tie the commonality together with these groups. And so I got this all set up, and we were doing this quarterly. And we'd bring them in the night before, have cocktails and social, kind of get people to know each other a little bit. And then we'd spend all day the next day talking about higher education issues and people's different point of views. The very first time I did this, the majority leader of the state senate and my board chair got up in the middle of the roundtable and said, let's take this outdoors. They were not having a common conversation at all. And the good thing is, if you have an outside facilitator who can intervene and be the referee, it helps. And that was the value of it. It took me 2 years to have those roundtables on a quarterly basis to finally get the group to agree on some common agenda. And once we did, and we were able to produce it, it worked well, and we were fairly successful in moving the higher education agenda in the state. Had to build the relationships. Had I not had that central experience about how to try to get along with people, we probably never would have managed that. I used the same kind of, well, what's critical here is you use those informal social moments to build relationships so people get to know each other. And I had a couple of other situations where I used that. I had a group that I called the Education Coffee Group, where I brought in the Secretary of Education and the people from the school board administrators and the school associations and the state teachers union, people who were working in the education field. And we would just have a no agenda coffee once a month. And that, over time, that really paid dividends, because then you could call people, you had a relationship, you could call people and work out situations that were difficult sometimes, or opportunities to do some advancing work. I had the same kind of thing called the wine cabinet. This was the governor's office, the director of the budgets, the governor's chief of staff, the various cabinet secretaries from education, health, economic development, labor, all these people that I would work with in some form or another. And we had gatherings semi-regularly where we would just drink wine after hours, never before 5, and get to know each other and find common ground. So that social interaction was not just happening, it was strategic and it was intentional, and it built the kind of relationship base that was important. Higher education foundation that I was able to work with was built here at Central in those kind of relationship building. Last, problem solving. When I was given the job to run the state legislative program, or this government relations program at Ball State, my president called me and he said, there's 2 problems that you have to solve. Problem 1, get money for anything you can get it for. 2, don't let them have any of our autonomy. We don't want anybody telling us what to do, was the message. 2 problems, money and autonomy. Well, what's that have to do with Central Methodist? Well, let me tell you what it has to do with Central Methodist. There's a guy in the history of this institution by the name of Braxton Rethridge. Some of you may know Braxton, or remember him. Braxton was my best buddy growing up days. We went to college together. So when I would show up back in Fayette when I was working at Ball State, he and I would generally get together in the evening, sometimes well into the morning, and we would have conversations about things. Well, Braxton was working for Central. In fact, the only job he ever had after he graduated was working for Central. And at that time, he was working with President Howe, and they were putting together this off-campus program that we now call CGIS, taking the mission of this institution to other places other than the campus. And he was telling me about how they were using telecommunication to do distance education. We're talking about the 1980s. I mean, this was not common in those days. And so, since my president charged me with trying to figure out how to make money for the institution, I said, here's an idea. Nobody in Indiana is doing distance education. So I put together, over several years, several different initiatives, projects, to ask the state to fund distance education related programming. And I got it done. I got the money. Ball State became the premier institution in the 80s of doing distance education in Indiana. That leads me to the second problem, the autonomy. There we go. The project is called the Indiana Partnership for Statewide Education. Let me tell you how this came about. There were problems out there in the state. Part of my job was to go sniff around and find out what policymakers were thinking and make sure that if there was a problem emerging that we could solve it before it became a serious problem. And so, give me the next, there you go. I find that the southeast region of the state does not have a physical campus offering education services to the and the economic development people in that part of the state say we got to have an educational access to higher education if we're going to be able to expand our economy. And so they're pushing on the governor and the legislature to build another campus in that part of the state. Next. Legislature does not want to fund another campus. They already think we got too many. And so I got legislators and the governor not wanting to build a campus. I got people who want a campus. And let's go to the next. The universities, the public universities, have a system we call the Higher Education Telecommunications System. It was run by the presidents and the organization of the universities. And it handled the telephones, the computers, and the telecommunications for the linkages between the universities around the state. There were people in state government who said, if we ran that rather than having the universities run that, maybe we could solve this problem out there in the southeast part of the state by giving access through distance education. But since the universities won't do it, we'll just rewrite the law and we'll take all that structure and we'll put it under state government instead of under the universities. Next. Presidents do not want to give up control of something they are responsible for. So, those are the 4 issues I had to deal with. So the presidents would get together once a month and they would always have one staff person who would go with them. I happened to be the staff guy that my Ball State president would take. So we're sitting in one of these meetings and I'm explaining to them, this is what I'm picking up out there in the grape. Policymakers don't think you're running your system right. They need to use that. They're going to take it over so they can use it to solve their problem. And the president said, go find a solution. So I had 1 month to find a solution. I found a solution. It's called the Indiana Partnership for Statewide Education. It was a consortial approach of all of the institutions to deliver distance education to the southeast part of the state. Now, it doesn't sound very difficult. It took 2 years to implement because you got 7 institutions and you got to decide who's going to teach English, who's going to teach math, who's going to teach biology, and everybody has to agree that they'll take that credit from whatever institution is taking. And then you had to, how are you going to enroll students? How are you going to give them financial aid? How are you going to record their academic records? How are you going to get them to graduation? All these little details of how you run a university was on our plate. That's why it took 2 years to meet. We met every Friday for 2 years, hammering out all these details. But we got it done. We were successful. We kept the telecommunication system with the universities because we ended up delivering that service that the state wanted. That was solving a problem. And it was solving a problem because when you have a liberal arts background, it prepares you, it prepares you to analyze complex situations, find solutions, and then do the articulation of that. This is an example of how Central prepared me for the journey that I had, and had not had the kind of experiences that I had at Central, I could not have done what I did on my journey. Just like the faculty and staff here at Central, when I was a faculty member, I have continued the interaction with many of my former intern students. And in the last month, I've been able to visit with a number of them. And they voluntarily, I don't ask, they voluntarily have said to me that the experience they had as interns was transformational and was a reason why they had the professional lives that they had. To a person, they say that. When I hear that, I take that as an expression of the value of my career, as all humans would. But more importantly, I take that as a reflection of the work that Doctors Jacob and Sanu did at Central to prepare me to do that work. I was having lunch with one of these former interns a few weeks ago. And at the end of the lunch, she says, one more thing. You don't know how many times in both my personal life and my professional life, I've asked myself a question. And the question is this. Would this make Dr. Perry happy and proud? And when she said that to me, my mind went back to Central. Because I've asked that same exact question on multiple times. Would this make Doctors Jacob and Sanu happy and proud? I hope the answer would be affirmative. When all is said and done, with our personal life cycles, the question we should ask ourselves, did we have an opportunity for transformational experiences? And equally important, were we able to do something that contributed to transformational experiences in the world around us? In my recent interaction with these student interns at Ball State, I am working with them to establish an endowment, a $2 million endowment to fund the Indiana Legislative Intern Program for next generations. Now, these are students who were students in the 70s and 80s and 90s that I worked with. So they're all pretty much through their career or at the peak of their career or beyond. I am asking them, since they tell me that they had transformational experiences, to make sure that they provide transformational services to the next generation of those students. Likewise, at Central, those of us who have been transformed by the experiences that we have are given the opportunity to make sure that we provide those same transformational experiences to the next generation of CMU students. And the sum is this core Eagle Pride value, is to have a transformative experience that fundamentally alters the way we operate, think, or behave. That's what we've had, it's what I had, it's what many of you have had, and it's what many of you are having now. And it's what holds the promise for the future of CMU students to come. Let me close by circling back to where I kind of began earlier. There is a current basketball coach, and I'm going to stress current basketball coach because there's some other basketball coaches we've had at Central that weren't quite as enlightened. But we have an enlightened basketball coach today. And this coach knows of my dreams, and he presented me with a great jersey. Yeah. He may be enlightened because of the three-point arc that took 25 years to get there after I was here. But I am sure if it had been there, there would have been a far different conversation with the coaches than what I had. My point about this coach demonstrates what a faculty staff person at Central does. They care about the individual, and they care about the individual through the lifetime. Thank you for the opportunity to share my journey with you.
Now we know why you didn't get to travel, Ted.
I can't, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, truth be told, how many people are a little disturbed? That's exactly right. Again, hopefully for our students, recognize the fact that there are people who graduated last year and 60 years back that continue to come back to Fayette, to continue to have those kinds of moments. Tad challenged you in 60 years from now, when many of us are not with us, when we're looking down, you're going to be standing here, you're going to be able to do the same kind of talk, and I'm willing to bet names change, stories change a little. When you go back to the core of what Tad's talking about, your story and Tad's are going to merge, and they're almost going to be one. Tad, thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Have a great homecoming.